How Ford became a successful car brand. Ford is the world's second largest family-controlled business, and it's not possible that you're not familiar with this brand. Not only did Ford revolutionize the automobile, but it also altered the nature of work and the function of transportation in the world we know and love today. Ford was one of the very few companies that managed to survive not one but two world wars, as well as the Great Depression, which is an impressive feat. So, how did they make that happen? How did Ford become the most successful brand of automobiles? Stay tuned to Success Stories to know about the legacy that they have created and how. So, let's begin. Ford Motor Company has been around for nearly 120 years. In that time, it has grown and changed so much that it's now a worldwide industry that makes much more than just cars. Too often, we think of a company as just its logo or brand name, which doesn't tell us much more than what we thought of its most recent product. Henry Ford started the Ford Motor Company because he was passionate about mechanical things. Because he stuck to his dreams, his company changed the course of history. Remember this piece of Ford history the next time you go to a used Ford dealership. It might make you appreciate the cars we have now even more. So first, let's talk about how Ford started the Ford Motor Company. As a child, Henry Ford was interested in mechanics and played around in a shop he built himself. Ford had made his own steam engine by the time he was 15 years old. At the age of 19, he had finished his apprenticeship as a machinist in Detroit. For the next year, he worked in southern Michigan fixing steam engines. In 1891, Henry Ford was hired as an engineer at the Edison Illuminating Company of Detroit. This was a great chance. 2 years later, in 1893, he was made chief engineer as a reward for his hard work. This early work with mechanics made it inevitable that Ford would want to build a car, which he did in 1893. His first internal combustion engine worked right on his kitchen table, and he used a version of that engine in his first car, the quadricycle, which he built in 1896. Ford's first gas-powered car wasn't much more than a wooden box with 4 bicycle wheels on it, but it was the beginning of a revolution in the way cars were made. But it was harder to find success in business. The Detroit Motor Company, which was Ford's first attempt, failed in just 18 months. The Henry Ford Company, which was his second try, is still around today, but it's now called Cadillac because Ford left it early on. But the third time was the charm, and in 1903, the modern Ford Motor Company was started. And when his company made money in its first year, Ford built a new plant in Ontario, Canada, to serve both Canadians and people in the British Empire. When the Model T was released in 1908, it was so popular that Ford had to solve problems to keep up with demand. He built an assembly line at a new factory in Highland Park so that many cars could be made at once. This changed the way cars were made, and he then made history by selling so many of them. By the time the Ford Motor Company stopped making the Model T in 1928, 15 million had been sold, making it one of the most popular cars of all time. Ford was able to make the Model T affordable for everyone, not just the wealthy, because of the assembly line, which was a new idea at the time. Because Ford could make cars so quickly and well, his sales success turned into a bonus for his workers. In 1914, Ford started paying workers $5 per day. This was twice as much as they had been making before and put them in the middle class. This raise in pay made it possible for his workers to buy the cars they were making. Ford kept coming up with new ideas and growing his business. In 1917, he opened the now famous River Rouge factory, which in just 10 years became the largest in the world. In the 1930s, more than 100,000 people worked hard in the Rouge complex to make everything that was needed to make a car. Steel, glass, rubber, and even wood were made, so the whole process was self-sufficient. Ford made his first truck based on the Model T chassis the same year. The same factory complex was used to make ambulances, tanks, and even airplane engines for the Allies in World War I, just 1 year after it opened. When veterans came home from the war, Ford hired them. Ford was the first company to make changes to the workplace to help disabled people do their jobs. Ford bought out the investors in the Ford Motor Company in 1919, making himself and his family the only owners. Henry put his son Edsel in charge of the business, and in 1922, Ford bought the Lincoln Motor Company. Edsel Ford was a big part of making the Lincoln Continental, a car that almost every American knows by name. His designs for the company are still well known today. By 1925, Ford started making its tri-motor airplanes, which helped make commercial air travel possible. He even let his patented work be used without royalties to help the industry grow. When Ford stopped making the Model T in 1927, it took him 6 months to retool his factories to make the Model A, which was his next car. This was the first car to have the blue oval logo that is still used today. Even though the Great Depression was going on, he sold 5 million of them. When the next World War broke out, Ford was again at the center of making things for the Allies. They made thousands of planes, jeeps, tanks, and other pieces of war equipment. Detroit was called the Arsenal of Democracy because the plant could make an airplane every hour. During this time, Charles Lindbergh was consulted about more claims to fame, and Rose Monroe became known as Rosie the Riveter while she worked on the Willow Run plant during World War II. Unfortunately, Edsel Ford died in 1943 from stomach cancer. This threw off the normal order of things, and Henry had to come out of retirement to keep the business going. Henry Ford II, Ford's grandson, was able to take over as head of the company in 1945. When young Henry took over the Ford Motor Company, he found that the books were not being kept in order. He quickly fixed this by putting in place new systems that would help the company run more smoothly as it continued to grow and make new products. Then in 1948, when young Henry was in charge, the now iconic F-Series trucks were made for the first time. They went on to be the best-selling trucks in the United States. In 1954, the Thunderbird became a classic right away, and in 1964, the Mustang started the pony car segment and is still one of the cars that has sold the most. Ford had a lot of different businesses. One of them was Philco, which was in charge of the first trip to the moon. Philco also helped NASA with its Apollo and Gemini missions and built satellites that are still used to send phone calls between continents today. Philip Caldwell was the first chairman of the Ford Motor Company who wasn't from the Ford family. This happened in 1980. It was amazing that the business had been run by the same family for over 75 years. During the next 20 years, Ford made a few more cars that became staples of the Ford brand. In 1985, the Taurus came out, and in 1990 and 1998, the Explorer and the Lincoln Navigator did the same. Due to Ford's business success, the company was able to get through the 2008 financial crisis without getting help from the government like the other American automakers did. Ford has had a few different CEOs in the last 10 years, but the company still cares about innovation and creativity in the same way that Henry Ford did. Henry Ford's creative legacy changed the whole world. He worked with Thomas Edison and built a worldwide company. Ford was able to become one of the most successful companies in the world by putting its troubled past behind it. The Ford Fiesta, Mondeo, Focus, and Mustang are just a few of Ford Motor Company's wildly successful automobile models. So, now it's time for us to put an end to today's video. We sincerely hope you enjoyed our video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share your response to it in the comments section below. Have you ever owned a Ford vehicle? If so, what kind was it? And do you have a favorite Ford automobile, if not the one that you owned? Or maybe there's one you'd like to own someday. Maybe you'd like to try out a Ford electric vehicle in the years that lie ahead. Hey, let us know your thoughts on everything related to this video in the comment section below. And please also subscribe to our YouTube channel by pressing that bell icon, and you'll always be notified of our latest uploads when we have them for you. Thanks for spending time with us today, and we look forward to doing it again soon. Thanks for watching.